hell happened here?
So, yeah, 160 subscribers. Thanks, guys. And my apologies on it taking so long to get back to making videos. I recently was gifted a small, perfectly normal human child by our Eldritch Masters. Things have understandably been a little crazy down here, but I'm getting back into the groove, so expect a lot more videos and other content soon. Now with all that out of the way, on to the video. Today we're going to be following up on my magnetic terrain on whiteboard idea. I wasn't happy with how my homemade flooring tiles were working out. I'd printed these on regular paper that was far too flimsy and went against the whole idea of the whiteboard dungeon in the first place: portability. Unless other magnetic terrain is stacked on top of it, keeping it in place, it literally will just fly off at the slightest sneeze, so I explored a couple of other options. The first, cardstock. I had some hope that this would work better than regular printer paper, but I also wanted to try out another alternative, specifically printable magnetic paper. Basically, this is what a lot of fridge magnets are made out of. This has a thickness of 12 mils, whereas regular paper has on average a thickness of about 9 mils. I was very curious to see if my magnetic terrain would even hold on to the whiteboard if placed on top of this stuff, so I got to it. In order to create my flooring tiles, I actually ended up using Adobe Photoshop, not a sponsor yet, but this definitely made the whole process easier. I originally created a grid pattern out of these little white dots that were exactly 1 inch square, and then placed a texture in the layer behind that. This is a very flexible system, as you don't have to worry about things like lining up with your grid. Whatever texture you put underneath is good to go, and you can tweak it as you like. I'd organized my wooden plank and stone textures into the different shapes I wanted, and then went ahead and printed those out on the cardstock. Printing on cardstock is just as easy as printing on regular paper, so the whole thing went smoothly, and I got my tiles cut out and ready for testing. These definitely had a lot more structure to them than their paper predecessors and didn't have a tendency to curl up at the edges quite as much either. The magnetic terrain that I'd already made also worked great with them, and while this was definitely a step up from the paper ones, I still think they were too light. Random sneezing might still mess up my terrain, and while I wouldn't ordinarily flip my dungeons upside down, it's always nice to have the option. Printing on magnetic paper was definitely more of a hassle than the cardstock. First, I needed to make sure to maximize printing space as much as possible, rearranging my custom floor tiles to take up as much real estate as I could. This is the biggest downside to magnetic paper: the entry price. I can get 50 sheets of premium cardstock off of Amazon for $20 US, but this magnetic paper ran me $12 for just 5 sheets. That's about $2.40 per sheet, aka they're expensive. I also wanted to make sure that I didn't make any mistakes in the printing process, so I ran 1 sheet at a time, which took a good deal longer, and still ended up having the alignment off with 1 sheet. Thankfully, I only ended up really losing 1 3x3 tile, so it wasn't that bad. I thought cutting these out was also going to be a lot more difficult, but thankfully it was almost just as easy as cutting the cardstock. Again, I went a lot slower here to avoid mistakes, but I just put a podcast on in the background and got to work. Finally, it was time to test my, fingers crossed, next generation of terrain tiles. Any headaches that had been generated building these things evaporated immediately. There is seriously no contest between the magnetic paper and even the cardstock in terms of stability. These tiles stick in place, hold in place, and on the off chance that me and my players do end up flipping the table, they're not going anywhere. The magnetic terrain I'd made works like a charm, and now I can start working on developing this whole whiteboard idea even further. For instance, using other whiteboards to add new sections of map as my players explore and wander through to new areas of the dungeon. Heck, they even actually work as surprisingly cool fridge magnets. I'd like to give a huge shout out to my first ever patron. Having some technical issues with the Patreon right now, but I'm genuinely thankful for your support and should have it all back up and running real soon. I've put in a good word with the great old ones, and they've assured me that once they wake up from their eons long sleepy nap time, that they will save you for absolute last when they exterminate existence as we know it. Okay, bye.